Our next speaker will be of an entirely different sort, but also I'm sure you will enjoy his message. He's going to talk about youth. Are they rebellious, or are they searching in search of something else? Dr. Gary Hopkins has a MD, he's a medical doctor. He also has a doctor in public health. He has a lot of experience in addictions, both personal experience and theoretical experience from his learning. Gary, I'm so pleased you're here. Please come on up.
Morning. You know, I think that the reason I was chosen for this talk was because I'm seen, even at age 65, as a rebellious sort, no? Yeah, and I think I'm seen as that, as a maverick, a rebel, however it might be. It's been interesting to look through some explanations of rebellion to come up with some thoughts for you today. Is rebellion a bad thing? It can be troublesome, can't it? Have you ever looked around to see the people you grew up with and looked at the ones who are rebellious to see how well they're doing today and if they're doing well? And you might find out that that rebelliousness isn't a great predictor of their success. It's a transitional thing sometimes. Sometimes it is a predictor of their success. But there's so much that goes into human behavior to say one thing causes this isn't fair. So I have got to learn how to use this. There we go. So the rebellion in young people is not a crime. It's a normal thing for some. On the contrary, it's the fire of the soul that refuses to conform. It's dissatisfied with the status quo that cries out that it wants to change the world and is frustrated with not knowing how. And that's that age. That's the age in which these kids look around and they say, this isn't for me. This doesn't seem right. There's incongruities here. And I'm going to struggle with that. And then there are those who don't even notice that. They wake up, they're traditional, and they go on just fine, and they're not rebellious. And that's kind of interesting. This church was founded by the energy of young people in their early 20s. Wasn't it? It was. Were they rebellious? Yeah, they were. You know, think about how early the early 20s is. When we look at the study of adolescence, which has been what I've studied throughout my life in public health, we divide adolescence into early, middle, and late. Some of the founders of this church were late adolescents. It goes up to around age 23, as is described today. Then this church was founded by late adolescents. Fascinating, isn't it? And I wonder how many people sat around and said, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just a bunch of youngsters with no life experience. Let's do it the way we've always done. And that happened, didn't it? Yeah, you bet it did. A young person is like a fire. With direction and guidance, he or she can change the very shape of the world. Without direction, the fires of youth are wasted at best. While at worst, they can become a dangerous, destructive force. To lead a meaningful life means harnessing the fires of youth, but first we must understand the purpose of youth itself. We've got to give it some thoughts. These kids that just bounce off the wall and seem to make us crazy sometimes are the ones that we need to harness the fire in. Because there's something there that's good. We have to find it. But you're not going to find it by standing at a distance and looking at the problem. You're going to find it by getting close, getting to know the person, and identifying the strengths. No? Does that make some sense? Okay, the period of adolescence is nested between childhood and adulthood. Teenagers are no longer content to play like children, but don't yet have the knowledge and the experience to be fully engaged in adult pursuits. Youth is one of the most precious periods of a person's life, and yet one of the most difficult. And it is. I tell you, it's been interesting to do research on kids for quite a while. What most people are searching for is a meaningful cause. I want to change the way the world works, or I can change the world. You know, Margaret Mead, famous anthropologist, once said that don't think that a few committed citizens can't change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And don't think that some of these kids can't change the world, because it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Adults burdened with the pressures of everyday life convince themselves that the world just is the way that it is, but young people cannot tolerate that sort of resignation. Don't put up with it. That's the constant conflict between the two groups. Young people abhor the status quo while adults' lives revolve around it. Many adults simply write off the teenage years as a rebellious period that a person must simply outlast. And by the way, if you were never a rebellious type, you don't know how true that really is. Young people, meanwhile, often think that adults have forgotten how to appreciate the very meaning and the thrill of life. Youth are rebellious, and adults may see the rebellion as one step shy of a crime. But rebellion is not a crime. The crime occurs when the rebellion is no healthy outlet. Rebellion, in fact, can be the healthiest thing for a human being, a pure energy that inspires a person to not only not give up easily, to refuse to tolerate injustice, and to go along with the idea just because everyone else is thinking of it. Okay, and the worst thing we can do with a young person, a spiritual or psychological energy, is to bottle it up. In fact, we must do everything we can to tap the energy, to focus and channel it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could put that into a bottle? So let's talk about what it takes to get that done. That's kind of a little synopsis of what rebellion is all about. Being a rebellious type, I've had a few people in my life who have been able to look at me and say there's something good there. And I've had some people that I've worked for who just haven't managed to be able to do that. They look at me and they go, oh, there's nothing but trouble here. And that's the truth. As a matter of fact, I was working for 2 different organizations at one time, and one of them could not wait to get rid of me, and the other one was focusing completely on my abilities. And it was interesting to watch the different forces at action here. The people, and they're here, I think all of them are here. The people in my life who've looked for the best in me, because believe me, as a former, he's done that, he's been there, done that, I'm all that. In trouble, the whole thing, kicked out of school and drugs and the whole drill. The people who've looked at me and said, how can we bring out the best of him are Dr. Handysides, Dr. Landless, Dr. Kitty Fryer, I guess it's Randall, Kitty Fryer Randall, Dr. Dwayne McBride, Dr. Hart. All of them. And they look at me and I'm just positive. And I don't think any of them have ever come to me and said, listen, someone called me about you, and they wonder why you're with us. And I'll bet you that all of them have gotten that call. What's this guy doing here? He doesn't fit into this organization whatsoever. You don't have to tell me about it if you don't want to, Alan. And that's the truth. And the difference has been is they look for the best in me. They didn't look for the worst. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Okay, before I start crying. Okay, times have changed, and their excitement for life. One of the questions that we face is how to channel that wonderful energy into young people and turning it into something productive and satisfying. Kids between the age of 8 and 18, it's a different world today. These kids today, that is my grandkids, and it's not even my kids, it's my grandkids' age, are spending about 10 hours a day in front of electronic media. It's different. The 2 things that kids do the most of in life today is sleep and exposure to electronic media. That occupies most of their day. Those 2 things. Isn't that fascinating? It can't be good, can it? Got to be something about that doesn't make a lot of sense because you're not getting human interaction. You're just sitting there. The resilience is being able to get through all this unhurt. Resilience is looking at a computer, looking at pornography, looking at violent games, going to school, going to the town, listening to all this trash talk and seeing the violence, seeing the drug use, being subject to sexual abuse, being subject to physical abuse, growing up in a house where the parents, one or more, is abusive and an alcoholic and doing well. People come out of amazingly tough environments and do well. They don't all come out and do well, but many of them do. One study out of Hawaii showed that in a very, very toxic, high-risk environment, 70% of the kids went on to live productive lives. 70%. And based upon the exposure they had at home, you couldn't have predicted that. Okay, the resilience, or this television, drugs, pornography, it's not going away. Our kids, your grandkids are going to see pornography on the internet. They're going to see it. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen it too, whether you wanted to or not. Television, drugs, porno, violent games, they're not going away. How do we get our kids through this? How do we get our rebellious kids through this so that they come out at the other end of life doing well in spite of what's going on? I tell you, this isn't on topic, but one of the things you can do is get the electronic stuff out of the bedroom. Just get it out of the bedroom. The kids who have a television in the room tend to watch more television. Television watching is associated with obesity and also lack of sleep. Kids who miss 15 minutes of sleep are more likely to fail in school. They don't all fail in school, but they're more likely to fail in school. Computers in the bedrooms in the States, 1 in 3 kids under the age of 3 have a computer in their bedroom, of all things. You believe that? Yeah, and just about all of them have television in their bedroom now. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because they tend to go to sleep later at night, and that's not good. They tend to wake up. A study in Belgium showed that kids who take their cell phone to bed at night are more likely to wake up to a text message. And once again, kids who wake up at night, interrupt sleep, tend to get worse grades in school. This isn't a good idea. Electronic stuff isn't made for the bedroom. It's made for some other part of the house, but not made for the bedroom. How do we create a culture with where kids do well in spite of these adverse influences? I mean, like, it's almost a non-message to say you got to get the television out of the house. That's a non-seller. People aren't going to listen to that. The issue is how do we beat the odds? How do we create kids who do well in spite of all that? Resilience isn't a trait. You can't teach it. I had a lady call me once and said, would you go to this school and teach the kids how to be resilient? That's not how you get to be resilient. Nobody teaches you how to beat the odds. It occurs in the context of environmental support or community support. It happens when other people matter. It happens when you get to know the kids at church and engage yourself in their lives. It happens in the lives of these kids who come from homes where mom and dad aren't so good at parenting, and you step up to make a difference in their life. You can be the difference in the lives of those kids. You can. I was teaching a class in Nigeria. I was teaching a class in Kenya. I don't know why I called this the Nigeria story. I've actually never been to Nigeria, Peter. There must have been a reason I did that. Not sure. Anyway, I was teaching a class in Kenya for Loma, and I was going through this thing on resilience, and I said, did any of you grow up in high-risk environments and beat the odds? And the girl raised her hand, and she said, yeah. I said, really, what was your risk? And she said, my father was married 7 times, and he was an alcoholic. I said, so you should have had sex at an early age, multiple sexual partners, possibly a teen pregnancy, even maybe more than once. You should have had a sexually transmitted infection. You should have used drugs. You should have used multiple drugs. And you should have been at risk for failing in school. That's your risk. What do you do? She says, I'm a doctor at a hospital in Nigeria. That's it. That's the Nigeria story. That's the Nigeria story that happened in Kenya. And I said, something happened. What's the story? There's more. I said, and she said, when I was a little girl, and I believe she said she was around 8, so a lady came to me and said, hey, can I take you to church? Our church is really nice. Now, she didn't say we got the best preacher in town. She didn't say we got the best message in town. She didn't say we got doctrine just nailed down pat. We got the sanctuary right and all that kind of stuff. What she said was the people there are really nice. And the little girl said, yeah. So she took that little girl to church, and guess what? The people were really nice. And they engaged her. They got to know her. They picked her up and they included her. And she got to be connected to a whole bunch of people who gave her the capacity to be resilient. She went to Loma Linda, finished medicine, went to a mission hospital, don't know where she is today. And it all happened because a lady said, hey, can I pick you up and take you to church this weekend? People there are really nice. But be careful with that because not everybody is always really nice. I spoke at a church once and I told that story. And a lady emailed me the next week and she said, some lady was here. And she comes about twice a year, but she was here when you spoke. And she brought a little girl the next week. I said, that's right, that's nice. I wrote back and said, so are you really nice? And she didn't answer. Because that's the second piece. You know what? And you don't get a second chance at this stuff. You get one chance at it. Because that's what these kids are looking for. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an environment of people who are willing to reflect the character of Jesus Christ. How do you describe Christ? I've done this in public a lot. The way people describe Christ is nice, kind, friendly, loving, caring, forgiving, non-judgmental. That's the way people describe Christ. Would you describe him that way? Yeah? You wouldn't. Your head's going both directions. Would you describe him that way? Yeah. Then I say, how do you describe Adventists in one word? 2 words, and they say, it's kind of quiet. And they say vegetarian, potluck, Sabbath. I said, yeah. So we got to work on that, don't we? We got to work on that. Nice, kind, friendly, loving, with the right message, huh? Doesn't that sound pretty good stuff? All those characteristics of Christ with the right message gives us the power to be an impact, to have an impact on the lives of kids, to make them resilient. Okay, self-esteem, that's how you feel about yourself, comes from love and acceptance and respect that we get from others. We tend to believe our value tends to come from how we think that other people think of us. If I think that you think I'm a jerk, I tend to think I'm not worth much. If I think you think I'm okay, I tend to think I'm okay. And some of these kids are coming from homes where they're told they were a mistake, they weren't planned, they were an accident, they were never wanted, and they need for you to engage with them. So you can give them a sense that they have value. It's our own sense of competence and achievement. Most of all, self-esteem and self-efficacy are promoted through supportive relationships. So this is a study. The resilient youngsters in our study had at least one person in their lives that accepted them unconditionally, regardless of temperamental idiosyncrasies, physical attractiveness, or intelligence. When young people with ADHD were asked what they believed was most helpful to them when they were growing up, the most frequent reply was there was someone. There was one of you. There was Fred. There was April. There was Alan. There was Peter. There was somebody who mattered. Someone made a difference in their life. I was down in New Zealand and talked to a teacher who said that just that year, a student had come to him and said, you were the one. You made a difference in my life. And he started to cry. And he said, you know, I don't think I even liked him that much. He said, well, whatever you did was what he needed. You were the one. And see, teachers get to experience that a fair amount. You don't always know when you're the one, do you? You may end your life without knowing that you're the one. But if you're the one who's there and available, you're putting yourself into a position to be the one that really makes the difference. And it doesn't take much. Researchers have distilled a number of factors that enables children of misfortune to beat the heavy odds against them. And this is, I already said this, didn't I? I guess I need to move on. Probably the most critical element of success within a school is the students developing a close relationship with at least one caring adult. Students who experience their school as a community, think about this. Kids who experience their church as a community. Kids who get up on Sabbath morning, go to church, can't wait to be there, not because the preacher preaches well, because you are that nice. This is what happens to them in school. They read more outside of school. They enjoy reading more. They enjoy class more. They like school more. And they avoid work less. Students who experience the school as a community are more academically motivated. They trust and respect school more. They enjoy helping others learn. They have higher educational aspirations. They have higher educational expectations. And the list goes on. This is called creating an environment of caring. The way the questionnaire reads is, do you like school? Are people nice to you at school? Do people care for you at school? Are you happy at school? These are the benefits of all those things. Do you like church? Are people nice at church? Do they care for you at church? Imagine that. Imagine that. That's so simple. Students who experience the school as a community perform higher on reading tests. They perform higher on math tests. They had I must have had a problem with that when I was in school. I wasn't so good at math. Had more concern for others. Had higher self-esteem. They resolved conflicts better. Teachers who have experienced their school as a community have higher expectations for student learning. They trust students more. They enjoy teaching more. They're more satisfied with teaching, and they have a higher job satisfaction rating. Things get better. When the school climate was rated as having a higher sense of community, the principal was seen as more competent. Parents are more supportive. There's more positive student-teacher relations. The National Longitudinal Study in Adolescent Health said, regardless of the number of parents in the home, which is usually a high risk factor, whether families are rich or poor, regardless of race and ethnicity, children who report feeling connected to a parent are protected against many different kinds of risks, including emotional distress, suicidal thoughts and attempts, cigarette, alcohol, marijuana use, violent behavior, and early sex. That's pretty powerful. A relationship where somebody genuinely cares. It doesn't make them perfect. It makes them better. Students who feel connected at school, once again, let's think about this, connected to church, commit fewer violent acts, are protected from cigarette, alcohol, and marijuana use. They delay first sex longer. School connectedness was consistently associated with better health and healthier behaviors among students. Social bonding. Schools that promote pro-social cooperative behavior and a culture of learning are central to preventing violence. The value of education is not so much what's taught, information, but rather the environment of learning that's created. Isn't that something? You'd think it was what you teach them that makes lifelong students. It's not. It's the environment that you create that makes them lifelong learners. Rebellious kids are this wonderful untapped resource of energy, or often untapped, and we need to pay attention to who they are, and as uncomfortable as it can be, get to know them. Now, each one of those won't be a match for each one of you, but some of them will be a match for each one of you. And we need to put ourselves around these kids so that when they feel the match, they drift towards the person that seems to care the most. Get to know their names. Just get to know their name. And eventually, you know how this goes. You walk into church and you go, I don't know your name. Okay, tell you their name. No big deal. Walk in the next weekend, they're looking at you at the corner of their eye. Want to know if you remember their name. You don't have to, but you got to try. So you can go over to them and say, I don't remember your name, but I tried. And they tell you, okay. Next week you walk in, and they're looking at you. Call them by name. You do this a few weeks, pretty soon you walk into church, they're going to come over to you. They are. They're going to come over to you because they know you care. you're starting to make an impact. When you see them at the grocery store, if they walk to you, that's okay. If they run to you, you made a difference. Now you're in the position you want to be in. Because they're going to run to you when you get this right. The fantastic energy that's within these kids of rebellion is, I can't even explain it. It's so powerful. And there's so much for us to do in order to tap into that energy, which will allow them to be productive citizens as they get into life. If I've gone back to speak at the college I went to, which was an interesting experience because I was not one of their greater students. Big time I was not. And to go back and speak there, I got up and said, I think I graduated last in my class from college here at PUC. And I don't think the faculty was very impressed with that, but I think it's the truth. But somebody mattered in my life, and there were several of them, and I kept going after it and kept going after it. And it started to get better and got over the humps, but it all happened because other people mattered. It didn't happen because I got smarter overnight. I didn't get smarter overnight. I was a non-traditional learner. You've got non-traditional learners here in this room. Danny Handysize is a non-traditional learner. At the next meeting you have, he'll be a speaker, I guarantee it. He's a health leader in the making in this organization right now. Have you seen him here? Have you gotten to know him? If you haven't, Dr. Handysize's son. He's a fantastic young man, not a traditional learner. He and I share very many similar traits. Sorry about that, Danny, but we do. In terms of learning style, he's a very bright guy. He's an assistant professor at Loma now, and he's going to be one of the highlights of this organization very quickly. And it's going to be because along the way he had tremendous parents, but other people got involved in his life who mattered. I thank you very, very much. I'm 2 seconds away. Thanks.